Man's alone time with kids caught on hidden camera. Stella couldn't believe it. Her jaw hung open as she watched the hidden camera recording she'd set up. It was recording her kids and her husband while she was at work. She could feel her pulse racing as she watched what her husband did to her children. He was the man she loved. He was surely joking, right? She never expected him to do something like this. She knew what she had to do. Stella Jackson's whole world was her children and her husband. She got married to Josh right out of high school nearly 10 years ago, 5 years later, and they had their first daughter, Emma. And then 1.5 years ago, they had their youngest child, Ben. Stella felt that she was living the best life she could, so when she decided to install a nanny cam, she didn't think she'd uncover what she did. Stella and Josh got pregnant after 5 years of trying. Their daughter came as a blessing just when they thought that being parents wasn't gonna be possible. But in 2015 and again in 2019, they welcomed their children into the world. Emma and Ben were their entire world, and at last they felt like a complete family, but nobody saw what was coming. Stella did find difficulties. She had to juggle being a mother and working full-time at her job. Some people called her Superwoman, but she felt the drain and the heartache of leaving her kids at home. When they first had Emma, they agreed that Josh would be a stay-at-home dad while Stella worked full-time, but Stella would find out what her husband did with her kids while she was at work. Stella felt that her husband had been acting strangely. He was being more distant than usual, and it always looked as if he was thinking about something, but he'd never tell her what the matter was. She didn't know that she'd soon find out something about her husband that would have the hair on her back of her neck stand. Stella felt that Josh had always been a great father to his children, but it seemed that recently he was wrapped up in thought. Stella asked him what the matter was, but he wouldn't even acknowledge it. One night, Stella woke up and noticed that her husband was missing from their bed. She called out her husband's name but got nothing back. She got up and looked through their door to a sight she wouldn't forget. Stella could see that Josh was closing the door to Emma's room. What was he doing in there? It was nearly 4 in the morning. It could have just been a nightmare. Stella didn't think too much about it. He could have just been doing his duties as a father. But she didn't know what would happen next. Stella's work was getting much more intense, so she felt she had to install a nanny cam so she could check on her children while she was working long hours. She felt clever. Now she could see her kids whenever she missed them. But when she decided to watch the footage, she was taken aback. A nanny cam's a great way of keeping track of your kids. You just press record and can then watch the recording anywhere at any time thanks to a handy app on your phone. Stella could never have prepared herself for what she found when she viewed the footage of her husband and their children. Stella set the camera to record when she got up for work. She didn't even think to tell her husband about it. Why should she anyway? She felt that she shouldn't have to. When she got her lunch break, she decided to open the app on her phone and watch the camera footage. She was missing her children, but she didn't know what she'd find on it. Looking for some peace of mind as she ate her lunch at work while watching the nanny cam video, Stella thought she'd find some cute moments of her and her kids to send to their family. But she never expected that this time she'd caught something else altogether. The video started with footage of her 2 kids in the living room. Stella smiles to herself as she watches her beloved children dance around to a song on TV. Josh looked like he was doing laundry in the background, but then suddenly he appeared in the shot. What he did next changed everything. In just a few minutes, her husband's true colors were brought to light. Stella watches as Josh, her husband of 15 years, picks up their daughter. He blows raspberries on her belly, which results in a giggle that would make anybody crack a smile. Then suddenly Josh did something else, and as soon as Stella saw it, there was no going back. She had to show everyone. Stella's frozen in her tracks. This had to be a joke, right? She watches her husband from the secret hidden camera and can't believe her eyes. Why would he do this? She knew she had to show people. He thought nobody was watching him, but he wasn't going to get away with it that easily. In the video, Stella's 2 children are goofing around in the living room. The baby jumps up and down in her bouncer to the beat. Meanwhile, in a lyric video for Katy Perry's #1 smash hit E.T., which Perry released as a single in 2011, is loudly blasting out the TV. With the music turned up to full volume, the older girl stands in front of the TV while waving a pair of brightly colored pom-poms around to the music, while her infant sibling bounces up and down in her stroller. It's clear that the children are having fun, but unbeknownst to them, Dad's about to step in. Stella's husband is seen walking in the background carrying a box. Noticing the children dancing in the living room, he puts the box on the table and walks into the living room. Instead of carrying on with his chores, Stella is shocked to see him walk right into the shot and do something completely unexpected. First, he leans down to his daughter and moves his hands up and down with a jerking motion. Yes, he's doing the robot, dancing his way into the room to the delight of both of his kids. They can be heard giggling hysterically as their father approaches them. Then he even begins to lip-sync along with a song miming, "Boy, you're an alien, your touch so foreign." After he's done the robot, he ends with a pirouette. Despite being quite a large guy, this amazing dad is still able to pull off some surprisingly graceful dance moves. Although most of the dad's moves are typical dad dance moves, it just makes the entire video all the more endearing to those who've seen it. But the dad isn't just dancing with his eldest daughter. He sidles up to the baby, leaning in and grooving in time with the baby's bouncing. It's obvious the baby's enjoying the performance too. The baby grins with delight as her dad pulls funny faces while he dances along with the music. At one point, the oldest daughter hands her dad her red pom-poms. He takes one and twirls it around, but the girl insists that he must dance with both of them. He shows off his silly dance moves which make his kids roar with laughter. He takes another pom-pom and goes through an impressive and sassy cheerleader routine. Then the daughter takes back one of the pom-poms with the pair continuing to twirl them around, holding one each. The song continues and so does Dad. Dad continues to shake and twirl the pom-pom, making hilarious faces as Katy Perry's song drops the beat and reaches a crescendo. As the song gets close to an end, the dad drops a pom-pom, the epic mic drop becoming one of the best moves we've seen in the video. Then he stops and nonchalantly leaves the living room and goes back to his chores, not knowing his dance routine was caught on camera. The viral video proves that while hidden cameras are often used for spying on people or more nefarious purposes, they can also catch some wholesome moments too. And unsurprisingly, most of those comments displayed an outpouring of love and affection for the caring dad. Indeed, the heartwarming video seems impossible not to like. Best Dad of the Year award goes to whoever he is, commented Susanna Danielle, a YouTube user. Gabriel Klopp agreed that this man is a dad who loves his kids. One thing is certain, these kids have an awesome dad that's down to earth and loves having fun and making them laugh. When Stella originally set the hidden camera up in her living room, she had only expected to be able to keep an eye on things and perhaps capture a few cute videos of her kids. Instead, she got something even better, her husband showing what a devoted dad he was. Indeed, this is a clip she'll treasure forever. However, thanks to Stella's hidden camera, the entire dance performance isn't just between him and his kids like he'd thought. Not that the video's anything to be embarrassed about. When Stella saw the footage, she was alarmed at first. Then a smile spread across her face. She knew she had to share her husband's antics with the world. The video that made the rounds on YouTube was called "Mom Finds Out How Dad Watches the Kids." Some viewers complained that this title was misleading because they were expecting something less heartwarming. Am I the only one who thought this was gonna be bad? Jace Bailiff asked. Viddy Caddy wrote, "From the title I thought this was gonna be a child abuser. Boy was I wrong." Stella uploaded the video on Facebook and it got a lot of attention. Then Mike Jordan uploaded the footage to YouTube with a comment, "He has the dance moves of a goat having a seizure, but the kids like it." Since the video was shared in September 2015, it has received 28,000 likes, more than 2 million views, and it has received over 5,000 comments. But this isn't the first time this has happened. Stella's husband unabashedly dancing with his kids isn't the only time something like this has been caught on camera. Lisa Roth uploaded a video titled, "Hidden Camera Captures Dad and Daughter Dancing to Justin Timberlake's Can't Stop the Feeling" on YouTube in May 2016. And again, it showed a devoted dad doing his best to entertain his daughter. Joe is traumatized, frozen in his tracks. This has to be a joke, right? He watches from the footage he secretly recorded from last night and his heart races. It was like he was watching his favorite horror movie, but this was no Hollywood slasher. This was real life, his life. He'd been waiting days for this moment, to finally uncover the truth about his missing food, and finally he had proof. But it was something that had left him feeling sick to his stomach. He knew he had to make a run for it. He had to get far away from this apartment, but time was running out. Joe Cummings had lived in Manhattan for 2 years now. An actor by day and waiter by night, it's not exactly easy to make ends meet in the city that never sleeps. But despite the overpopulation, cost of living, and less than friendly folk, there was nowhere else Joe would rather live. He dreamed all his life about living in the Big Apple, and now he finally was. Things may not have been perfect career-wise for Joe, but the budding actor had a great apartment, a fantastic girlfriend, and awesome friends. He was living the dream. But then one day, Joe's world turned upside down. You see, Joe was well aware that New York was an expensive city to live in. From $5 coffees to $1,000 rent for small studio apartments, Joe tried his hardest to save money however he could. So when he started having to shop more often because the food in his fridge and pantry was gone quickly, he became worried. His routine had not changed, so he had no reason to eat more than usual. But there was something else living with him who could know the answer. Joe's girlfriend Lucy had just recently moved into Joe's apartment. The two lovebirds were on cloud 9. This was a new chapter in their lives. But this problem with the missing food had started to gnaw at Joe. Why would his girlfriend take his food? Why didn't she just ask? Joe knew he had to ask Lucy about the missing food. He hoped she wouldn't be offended, but he just needed some answers. After all, he was wasting his hard-earned wages on buying more food, and not to mention, he was saving up for Lucy's engagement ring. But Joe had no idea what was coming to him. One night, as Joe and Lucy slept, Joe heard strange noises coming from the kitchen. A thump on the floor, a creaking door, and steps. His heart started to pound. Who was in the house? In his sleep, Joe couldn't tell if it was real or if he was dreaming. But the next morning, when some of the food that was there the night before was gone, he realized he had to act fast. But when the truth came to light, Joe's entire world turned upside down. The following morning, Joe poured himself a glass of orange juice and confronted his girlfriend about the missing food. To his surprise, she denied everything. Joe didn't want to call his girlfriend a liar, but he knew that something strange was happening. Maybe she was a sleepwalker without knowing it. Heck, maybe he was. Nonetheless, the only way to know for sure was to get evidence. But what Joe would soon uncover would leave him feeling sick to his stomach. Another thought soon came to Joe. Maybe an animal entered the apartment and stole the food, but that seemed very unlikely. He always made sure to lock all doors and windows at night because his neighborhood wasn't exactly the safest in New York. Not to mention the food in the refrigerator was gone and he knew no creature able to open refrigerator doors. It must have been something or someone else. Joe had had enough of speculating. It was time to act. But Joe had no idea what was coming. Joe headed out of the city armed with determination and bought a security camera equipped with night vision. He set it up at the kitchen corner near the roof, making sure the corner had an unobstructed view of the refrigerator and the pantry. He knew he wasn't going to tell his girlfriend so that if it was her, he could catch her in the act. He pressed record and carried on with his day, but the next morning he removed the memory card and prepared himself to finally know the truth. Turns out he wasn't ready at all. The movie starts pretty normally. It's late at night and Joe and his girlfriend are getting ready to go to bed. They're laughing and play fighting before they turn off all the lights and leave the kitchen. The following 2 hours, there's no movement at all, except for lights coming in from the street. Then something starts to stir and nothing could have prepared Joe for what he was about to see. Joe's lost for words. This had to be a joke, right? It had to be a prank pulled by his friends. He watches the footage again and with every glance he feels sick. This was not what he was expecting to see. How could it be possible? There was no coming back from this, no way at all. Joe's heartbeat quickens as he watches a woman slowly pull herself out of the storage area above the kitchen entrance. This woman had to be his girlfriend Lucy, right? She must have found the camera and done this as a joke. But then the hairs on the back of Joe's neck stand up straight. He knew this was wrong, yet he continued to watch the footage, hypnotized. But what he saw next made him run far away from his apartment. The woman, who Joe thought it was his girlfriend, leaves her hiding place, crawls on a table and stabilizes. Then she reaches out and grabs a nearby step, which she uses to jump to the ground. As Joe watched this woman, he had a feeling she'd done this before. His mind was full of questions as he tried to understand why his girlfriend would go through all this trouble. Then the woman looks up into the camera and Joe can see her face clear as day. It's not his girlfriend. The woman in the video is none other than a complete stranger. Joe feels sick to his stomach, but he knew he had to watch more. Joe watches the woman go round his kitchen as comfortable as if it were her own. She opens the fridge door, snatches a bottle of orange juice, drinks it straight out of the box. Then she climbs on the sink and urinates. Joe watches the nightmare unfold, but more horror was to be uncovered. At one point in the video, the woman's seen nestled on Joe's couch, nibbling, when she hears a noise from the bedroom. Surprised, she enters Joe's kitchen and hides. Then Joe appears and goes to the fridge for a glass of water. A few minutes after his departure, the woman returns and resumes her snacking. What was going on? It takes hours, but Joe cannot keep his eyes off the footage. Who was this woman? Joe watches as the morning light begins to creep into his apartment. Then the woman unnervingly crawls back into the storage area. Shortly after, he sees himself entering the kitchen, dressed in his everyday clothes. He opens the fridge and drinks the juice straight out of the box just as the woman did a few hours ago. Joe finishes watching the footage until the end, and he's left frozen in his tracks, trying to comprehend what he just witnessed. All the while, an unknown intruder could potentially be hiding a mere few feet away from him. Joe felt a mixture of terror and relief. After all, the footage proved he was not crazy. Someone had stolen his food. But it wasn't his girlfriend as he thought from the beginning. It was something much worse. There was a strange woman in their apartment, hidden in a storage room in the kitchen, just a few short steps from the bedroom. He had to get out of there fast. Joe grabbed his computer and rushed out of his apartment. He ran to the police station where he explained what had happened and showed them the footage. "I do not know how she got there," he proclaimed. "The only way to get in is through the window because I'm on the top floor and there's an escape route." The cops thankfully understood Joe's concerns and then escorted him home, where they were able to arrest the woman. But what they discovered only made him even more petrified. After questioning the woman, the police discovered she'd been hiding in Joe's apartment for at least 2 weeks. Once the ordeal ended, he posted the terrifying video on YouTube, where he quickly became viral. And while many doubt the validity of Joe's story, it's not a bad idea to regularly check your storage space. You never know what might be hiding there, as Tracy from South Carolina was about to find out. It was like a horror movie coming to life. Part of her even wondered if she had a very lucid nightmare. There was no other way for her to explain what was happening, but it was not a fiction. He was there at home, since who knows how long without having any clue. And when all the implications of this fact began to emerge to her, she couldn't help but panic. Even before this incident, life hadn't been easy for Tracy. She was a single mother of 5 and lived in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Throughout her life, she struggled to make ends meet and provide for her family. Some of her children were now grown up, but they all lived together in the family home to reduce costs. Despite their circumstances, they lived a happy life. But then something began to happen that threatened all of that. One day in September, Tracy started hearing strange noises coming from the attic. The first thing she thought was there might be an intruder, but she always was very careful to lock all doors and windows. She did it as a precaution because they lived in a poor part of the city, and burglaries were quite common. She saw no sign of forced entry and thought it was all her imagination, but she soon began to wonder if anything else was happening. Over the next few days, Tracy still heard random sounds coming from above. She asked her children if they were playing in the attic, but they all said no. She believed them. The attic was dark and moldy and was not a fun place for kids. She rarely went up there herself, except when she had something to store. But as the noises continued, she proposed a different theory. One day as she cleaned the house, Tracy realized that the sounds in the attic were also moving from room to room. Then it came to mind that the strange noises could very well come from a possum or raccoon that had somehow found its way into the house. She thought she'd need to call animal control, however it was a Saturday and they didn't work on weekends, so she decided to wait till Monday, but the presence in the attic seemed to have other plans. That night, around 2:30 in the morning, Tracy was awakened by creaks coming from the ceiling. But this time she also heard gentle beating noises on the floor of her own room. She looked down and in the twilight of the night she saw a number of nails scattered on the carpet. She realized that the nails were coming out of the planks of the ceiling. Her heart stopped. It was not a possum or a raccoon. Tracy remembers thinking there must be poltergeist problems. She was too terrified to go to the attic to investigate, so she threw the blanket over her head and did her best to go back to sleep, but she knew she had to do something about the entity occupying her attic. She couldn't continue living like this. The next morning, she acted. In the morning, Tracy was relieved to hear that her nephew was visiting her 2 grown-up sons at her home. The presence of the 3 young men comforted her. She told them about the noise in the ceiling and asked them to check the attic. The men climbed as Tracy waited just outside the attic door in the hallway. None of them were prepared for what they would find. Once in the attic, the young men realized something was wrong. A strong, nauseating odor struck them immediately and they saw garbage scattered on the ground. The old coats and jackets that Tracy kept for storage were all in a corner of the room near the heating unit. And then they saw it. It was a body. As soon as the men began to move into the attic, the body in the corner stirred. Apparently, he was sleeping there before they went up. He looked at them and they looked at him, and they all stopped in surprise for a few seconds. Then the man got up and rushed past them and towards the stairs. Tracy saw him as he escaped and realized she knew this man. The family called the police, but the man had already left before they arrived. But it wasn't the worst. Tracy recognized the intruder. More than 12 years ago, he did some housework for the family. Tracy and he had been together for a short time, but since he had a history of criminal behavior, Tracy broke up with him. The man didn't take the break well and therefore fought back. The man wanted to find Tracy, but she refused, and one day he stole a truck. He was then caught and sent to prison, but while he was locked up, he continued to harass Tracy. He sent her letters informing her that he'd changed and begging her to pick him up. After his release, Tracy heard the rumor he'd moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, but she discovered the truth in the worst possible way. The police responded to the call and searched the attic where the man had been found. It seemed like he'd been living there for a few weeks. He'd packed all the old coats and jackets in the heating unit and was sleeping in the heating unit, says Tracy. They also found a number of plastic cups where he'd relieved himself, which explained the bad smell. But an even more frightening discovery was soon made. The investigators discovered that the intruder had installed the vents on the ceiling so he could look into Tracy's room. Tracy couldn't contain her horror at the thought. "I'm stunned," she said in an interview. "How can you look at someone through a vent?" What was worse, they still did not know how he'd entered the attic, because the only door leading to it was in the hallway between his children's bedrooms, and the threat remained. Although the police know his identity, the man was able to escape the authorities and is still on the run. A few days later, Tracy thought she saw him near the house, but the police were unable to find him. She wants justice. "I want him to be charged," she said. "It could be someone else to whom he's doing the same thing, but she might not be so lucky."